You've already looked at inequalities on the number line. Now let's look at absolute value equations on the number line. So let's go to Algebra with One Unknown, and we'll go to absolute value equations on the number line. Now, this program, I believe, is kind of far-reaching because we don't usually introduce absolute value in its true sense, but the further you get on in mathematics, the more you will understand that absolute value represents the distance from the origin. So right now we see the absolute value of our letter x is equal to 0. The distance from the origin is 0. If we go 1, oh my goodness, this is saying the absolute value of our number is 2, which means its distance from the origin is 2. So you see, we get 2 points that have a distance of 2 away from the 0. And 3, 2 points. Now, one of the things that's a mistake that comes, in my opinion, from the lower grades is that students learn absolute value and they learn that it's just the positive value. And so teachers drill them on what's the absolute value of negative 3? 3. What's the absolute value of 4? 4. What's the absolute value of negative 4? 4. And so they get this positive stuff. And then they work equations that are like this. The absolute value of x is equal to 3, and the teacher asks them what the answer is, and they say 3 and negative 3. And then they will ask them, what's the answer to this? And they will say 4 and negative 4, and 5 and negative 5, and 6 and negative 6. Oh, I didn't go that far. 1 and negative 1. And students get the impression that when they find one answer, the other one is just the opposite, which is not true. Because if something else is locked up with the x in the absolute value, another term, everything changes. And now I want to say here, like the absolute value of x is equal to 2, but watch what happens if I put a plus 1 in here. The answer is not 1 and negative 1 anymore. In fact, it's not 2 at all. Look, it's 1 and negative 3. And this is where the concept of distance is equal to. So if you set this in your mind, x plus 1 equals 0, x is negative 1. This is really telling the difference between our mystery points and negative 1 right here, which doesn't even have a value. But if you look at this negative 1, can you see where I got negative 1 by setting what's inside the absolute value equal to 0? I would get negative 1. That the distance between that negative 1 and my mystery numbers is 2. So the distance between x and negative 1, the opposite sign of this, is 2. And if we change this, you see, it's just moving everything up and down the number line. And you have to get good at solving the problems. And it's not, unless the x is there by itself, the answers aren't 2 and negative 2, 3 and negative 3. If there's anything locked up in here, they will not be the number and its opposite. Things get even more complicated when we look at advanced changes and we allow a coefficient on the x. Then things get more complicated. So like say, if I say 1/2 x plus, the absolute value of 1/2 x plus 4 is equal to 3. If I wanted to know what my x, what this is centered around, I'd have to set 1/2 x plus 4 is equal to 0, or 1/2 x is equal to negative 4, and x would equal to negative 8. Everything here is 3 away from is balanced on either side from negative 8, and 1/2 of that distance is 3, so it's 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now it'll take a while before you really understand how the distance and what it's away from works out. In fact, we don't usually get too much into that until we get to the really higher classes. But the one thing I want you to make sure is that you don't get the idea that if an absolute value equation has an answer of one particular number, that it automatically has the opposite, because it isn't necessarily so. In fact, it will only happen when we give you the simplest of problems, where the x is by itself in the absolute value, and there's nothing else in there, and it's equal to 3. Now, of course, the distance from the origin cannot be negative, so if you try to put negative here, you see I'll make this thing pop up and yell at you. Did you hear it? There it goes. Absolute value can never be negative. There is no solution to this. So if it says the absolute value of x is any negative number, there is no solution. So there can be one solution, or two solutions, or no solutions. If the absolute value of x is 0, then you get just the one solution, because x is 0. And now when we go to try the problems here, we hit the problem, and then we'll say either this stuff inside here, if the absolute value of 4x plus 12 is equal to 12, I need to get my marker up here. Let's see if I can do that. This is going to make things more difficult for me. I'm going to bring up the Howe-Two marker and minimize that. It'd help if I push the right keyboard and ended that and brought up this marker. Now I'm actually dealing with the marker and I'm not working with the problem, but we'll use this marker here to solve this problem, and then we'll go and put the answers in. So if the absolute value of 4x plus 12 is 12, then that means one of two things. Either the stuff in here, 4x plus 12, is really equal to 12, or the stuff in here, 4x, not very good at drawing with the mouse, plus 12 is equal to the opposite of that, negative 12. So when you have an absolute value equation, I want you to see that somebody is really giving you two problems in one, more for your money. So you have to solve each one of these equations. This one will give us 4x, and if we subtract 12 from both sides, if I subtract 12 from this side, subtract 12 from this side, I get 4x is equal to 0, and x is equal to 0 is one of the answers. And if I solve this one, I get 4x, put red here again, subtract 12, I get 4x is equal to negative 24, and x is equal to negative 6. Now look, one answer is 0 and the other one is negative 6. Not 6 and negative 6. I'm going to minimize the marker now, and we have to remember these answers 0 and negative 6. So I'm going to put the answers in 0 and negative 6, and we check, and we win. So look, because there was this 12 in here, it is not going to be the same number with the opposite sign. Let's work one other problem. All right, absolute value of 4x plus 36 is equal to 8. I'll bring up this marker again, and I'm going to work two problems. I hope you know what they are. Absolute value means I get to work two problems, 1, 2, instead of 1. The problems are what you would expect, 4x plus 36 is equal to 8. And the other one, drum roll please, is 4x plus 36 is equal to negative 8. So in both cases, I usually like to work these together because the steps are so similar. We need to subtract 36 from both sides of this equation. And we need to subtract 36 from both sides of this equation. And this will kill this off, and we get 4x is equal to, and looks like it's negative 28, and x is negative 7. Now, I have seen so many students stop right there and say negative 7, and then they say the other answer is positive 7. They couldn't be more wrong, and they get half of the problem wrong. Well, 50% will not pass you on absolute values, so you've got to learn how to work these absolute value equations. So over here, the 36's will kill each other off again. We get 4x is equal to negative 6 and 8 is 14, 44, and x is equal to negative 11. So here's where my brain gives way. I got to remember 7 and 11, negative 7 and negative 11. I'm going to minimize here, negative 7 and negative 11. Check our answers. We are right. 2 right. I hope you see how absolute value equations are worked. Have fun. Absolute value equations give you the chance to work 2 equations instead of 1, because there will be the 2 points that are on the problem, and it all depends on how things line up, where the points fall. So, thanks. Learn how to do this. You'll be in the minority. Let's be really masters of algebra.